Big topic. When do hedgehogs need help? So some people say all the time because they are pretty helpless these days. But there's a few guidelines to go by. So again, if you follow Facebook, you'll see I'm putting these out all the time. But newborns, this is a bit of a contentious one. So if they're pink, panic. That's my general rule. If you see them out of the nest, that's bad. Mum's rejected them. Unless she's walking around carrying them in her mouth, moving them, then that's a bad sign and they need immediate attention. So they'll need to be put onto a hot water bottle with a towel in between. And the local vet or local rescue will need to be out as soon as they can. The only exception is if you disturb a nest, if you're demolishing a shed or something like that and you lift it up and you find hedgehogs, then if you can, put it down and ignore it for 4 weeks. If you really can't, give a rescue a call and they can come out and move them without stress. If you stress them out, mum may reject them or worse, eat them. It's vile, but that is what they do in response to stress. So if it's pink, panic. Then there's the juveniles, so they're the smallies. They tend to be tennis ball size-ish. I've got a post next about how to guess their size, but they're generally not a problem unless it's the autumn winter, like I said before, and they need to come in because of the cold. So generally we don't worry about juveniles unless we're coming up to the colder months and they're under 500 grams. Wheezing and difficulty breathing, this one's really hard to gauge because hedgehogs, we're predators, and when you approach them, hedgehogs huff, which sounds like wheezy, raspy smokers breathing. We've had vets call us up asking to take in hedgehogs that have bad breathing, and they've just been telling them to go away. There's nothing wrong with them. So there are some ways of telling if it's breathing or if it's them telling you off. If they're on their side like this and they're wheezing away, that's bad. They need to go straight to the vet or rescue. If you can see bubbles coming out of their nose, that sort of thing, or they're really heaving and they're unballed. So, but if, again, as I said, if in doubt, give someone a call and they can try and figure out like that. Out in the day, we always bang on about this one too. So if a hedgehog's outside and you come across it between dawn and dusk, then give us a call anyway. They're not supposed to be out in the day. There's only 2 reasons a hedgehog would be outside in the day, and that's mums who are finding nesting material. So if you see a hedgehog scampering around with bits in their mouth and they're walking around with a lot of purpose in the spring or the autumn, that's a mum building a nest. The other reason is they're in pain. So hedgehogs will only be out in the day if they can't sleep. And the general reason for that is pain or disturbance. So again, the exception is if you've moved a shed or moved to something and you've disturbed it. But hedgehogs don't deal well with pain. They try and run away from it. So even hedgehogs that look fine and are acting erratically, that's a sure sign to take them to a rescue or a vet. Flies buzzing around. So hedgehogs, despite the smelly living conditions, they are very clean animals. They keep themselves really clean. So the only reason flies are going to be bothering them is if there's a problem. And they wouldn't let flies land on them unless they were really weak. So that's another one to get the rescues involved. Wobbly on their feet. So again, a lot of different causes, but the main ones are dehydration and, well, paralysis, that sort of thing, or injury. So again, if you see one wobbling around, they look very sort of animated, then they need to go into. And I kind of touched on it before, but lying on their side or lying flat out and not balling up, that's a absolute red flag. They shouldn't want to interact with us. So if they're not balling up at us and they're just lying there, that's a very poorly hedgehog that's not going to do well. And then you've got the obvious ones like visible wounds and blood, or if they're stuck in gold netting is quite common, or those plastic beer rings. So up here we've got Jerry, who was stuck in a watering can. They think he'd been living in there for a few weeks and then he just got too fat one day. So we cut him out. He was absolutely fine. And yeah, so we've done I did this last year. It's a guide on how to gauge it with their balling. So it's a really good way of seeing how they are without having to poke and prod too much. So you want this really nice round ball shape, nice and straightforward. We had one brought in like this from a vet. You can see it's peanut shaped. That hedgehog was incredibly emaciated. I could feel every single notch on every single bone. It was very, very poorly, and she died that night. Um, so this is a very, very sad state to find a hedgehog in. You want to see them round. So if it's a peanut, take them straight to the rescue. You can also tell from their fringes. So here you can see his fringe is all bulgy, it's all spiking out at you, and it's covering his face, which is protecting his face. Whereas this one, the hair is smooth from the nose all the way down to the spikes, and it's a relaxed fringe. So although she's balling up, she's not committing to actually looking after herself, and she's too weak to do that final tense bit. So the fringes are another good way to tell. And then incomplete balls. So if you've got limbs sticking out, it's quite hard to see in that picture, but there's a little leg sticking out there, and then another one there. This one had been caught in a mechanical mouse trap, and had two very sore legs. He was absolutely fine again after a few weeks and some pain relief, but you can tell from the ball there that he wasn't happy. And then hoglets, so they can't ball up properly for a few weeks. They start to try at about 3 weeks, and then they don't master it until about 6-7 weeks. So you can see Teasel has legs in every corner. She hasn't quite learned to tuck it in, and it's also a bit of a strength thing. It takes quite a lot of power for them to do it. So balls are a good way to tell. This is a picture I was talking about a minute ago. I have put it on Facebook before, but it's a good way, if you don't have a scale, of seeing how big a hedgehog is. It's a bit rudimentary, but generally in the winter, so in Devon, I would say mid-November onwards. If they're smaller than a mango, bring them in. About 500 grams and less is not good, so they need to come in. So how we can help in the gardens, I can see the timer. I've got about 5 minutes left to waffle. So if I cut out, head to the chat and click on the next link, the password's the same, hog1 with a capital H, just to let you know. So hedgehog friendly gardens, the studies that have been done recently, like I said, focused on habitat fragmentation. So it's amazing when people do it in their garden, but we need whole communities on board for it to be effective. So one of the main ways is hedgehog highways. So you probably heard about this before, but where you cut holes between fences, hedges, just so they can access. It doesn't need to be big enough for a cat or a dog to fit through. The average hedgehog's about a foot long and about 20 centimeters high, even the big ones. So it doesn't need to be much bigger than 20 centimeters squared. But it really, really helps. And if you can get your neighbors on board to be a bit more hedgehog friendly, then that's perfect. Hedgehog housing is another one we get lots of queries about. So this is the type that we have found to be the best. So the wooden ones with the removable roofs and the separate living compartments. Hedgehogs really like them because they feel safe in this bit, and you can also put food out in the living area, which stops cats eating it, because that is one of the biggest problems is cats come along, they find out where the hedgehog places are, and they eat all the food. So yeah, they're fantastic. If you put them, have a quiet area of the garden, you can put them in, and it helps to cover them up with a bit of foliage. Then you are likely to start seeing hedgehogs nesting in sort of spring and autumn time. Ponds, if you've got any ponds or water features, having ladders out of them is essential. Hedgehogs are actually really good swimmers, but then they haven't got much stamina. So they will soon start to struggle, get tired, and they do often drown in ponds. So as long as there is somewhere shallow for them to come out, then that's absolutely fine. Bug houses, so it's a lot more popular these days, but to have bug places, bug hotels where we can encourage the population of bugs to increase. So this is basically KFC for hedgehogs, and they can make the most of that. You do see a lot of communities with hedgehog signs. So if you've got an active community that are really on board with that, it's good to campaign for that. And then the contentious one, which is lack of pesticides and fertilizers. I think it is dying out slowly. It's certainly more of a old-fashioned way of gardening, but the use of spraying everything down, because you can't target what you're killing. If you're trying to kill bugs, you're going to kill what eats them. And if you kill the bugs, you're killing off a food supply. So it's best to try and create some sort of a cycle in the garden rather than just killing it off. And that's sadly one of the main reasons why we can't have a hedgehog highway system outside, because our neighbours are very, very active with their pesticide use. So it just wouldn't be a good sign. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, I will unmute everybody.